Okay, so. Breathing. All right. Oh. I know I did too. Okay. So I begin first by honoring the indigenous Ohlone Nation on whose stolen land we meet here today. I thank you all for coming here. This is the course called Palestine Ethnic Studies Perspective, and we are being joined by people online on the AMED Facebook unofficial page. I have to say that. The university tried to shut us down and exercise disciplinary measures against me. Somebody posted my post criticizing President Wang for saying that Zionists are welcome on campus. So, just to say that. We can talk more about this today, but today the class we're going to be talking about 1968 resistance. Last week, as you know, we talked about the 1968 strikers, and we had veteran strikers from the 1968 student strike actually come and speak about their experiences engaging with the students. We were engaging in an intergenerational conversation. This is part of our open classrooms for people who do not know. It is part of the AMED Studies, Arab and Muslim Ethnicity and Diaspora's open classroom, where we open our classrooms. We open our classrooms to the community, when we say community, communities around the world, communities of justice, who come together to learn and co-teach with each other. So it is not just opening the classroom to invite the community in. We're also opening the classroom to have the students and the university being part of the community. And as I said last time, and I say all the time, that there is always a relationship between the university and the community. It just depends what kind of a relationship it is. There can be a relationship that's antagonistic, where the university looks down on the community and thinks that they can take information from the community and make careers out of it. And there is a different way of thinking about the relationship between the university and the community, where we are engaging together in the project of, as we say in AMED, justice-centered knowledge production. In other words, we are very clear about producing knowledge that is for justice. People can produce knowledge for all sorts of things, and people do. And people produce knowledge to create nuclear bombs, and they produce knowledge to create the water cannons that they sprayed over the people who were protecting the land and the water in Standing Rock. They can do phosphorus bombs. They can create napalm. They create all sorts of things, or the nuclear bombs that they dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Last night we spoke about the Spanish Civil War, and we talked about Guernica, the Basque town that was blown to smithereens during the Spanish Civil War by Franco's phalange, completely bombed. And again, we ask a question of why is it that the Basque area gets bombed? Why is it that the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki get bombed with nuclear bombs? And I'm not suggesting that anybody should be bombed with nuclear bombs. How come Nazi Germany was never attacked that way? Why is that the case? Why is it that when there is questions of war, when there is a war, imperialist and colonialist wars actually go into them trying to destroy communities completely? And of course, this is the subject of our discussion today and always. But I want to continue by talking about what is it that we do here. So AMED Studies Program, for people who do not know, is a program that we started in 2007 in order for us to teach about Arab, Muslim, Palestinian studies that has not been part of San Francisco State University and that has been lacking and needed to happen. And it was also as a result of a struggle that the community has waged. Community has waged to hold the university accountable and to say that you cannot continue ignoring things that are quite important. And the program was, we founded the program. We started organizing one thing after another. The students succeeded and we were supporting them, the community was supporting them in inaugurating the first Palestinian cultural mural honoring the late Professor Edward Said, which is outside the Student Center, and we will take you to see it on the way so you can see what it is. I know that, Tony, you've seen it before, and many people in the audience have seen it. But that was also as a result of a very strong struggle by the students, and we can also have a discussion about that for people who are interested or don't know. And this was also, again, it was part of what we call the spirit of '68, that we are inspired by the strikers who struck 50 years ago at San Francisco State University and basically waged the strike in order for us to have a different kind of knowledge, to decolonize the curriculum, to learn with each other, to change things around. This was really important. And last week we had the strikers coming and speaking to us, and we believe that we would not have been here today. We would not have had the AMED Studies program. We would not be able to be here today in a space called Ethnic Studies, the College of Ethnic Studies, had people in 1968 not struggled for what they struggled. But we also need to remember that the struggle did not start in '68. This was the latest, one of the latest episodes of the struggle. People have been struggling as long as there have been humanity and people want to be free, wanted to have justice, wanted to have dignity, want to live in peace. This is not something new. We study different parts of history. We are marking the 50th anniversary of the '68 strike. And of course the American Indian movement, but I am waiting to speak of that in a minute. And we remember that one of the students at San Francisco State was Richard Oakes, who was part of the takeover of Alcatraz. And we have the Richard Oakes Multicultural Center inside the Cesar Chavez Student Center. We also have Rosa Parks. We have a Malcolm X mural. I mean, this is the way in which we actually think about how do we think about the legacies of our communities, and how do we remember them, and how do we create oral histories, compile oral histories, and also compile the history in the making. So what we're doing today, we're also thinking about the past, we're learning from it, we're drawing lessons, we're drawing connections. Last night when we talked about the 1936-39 Spanish Civil War, the Basque struggle, the Catalonian struggle, 1492, when the Castilian and Aragon came together to create the unity on take over Spain, and they sent a man to look for the Indies, and the man got lost. And the colonization, settler colonial project of the Americas began, of the Western Hemisphere. We also think about what does that mean for today's world. What do we think when we think about what happened then? And also last week when we were discussing, and the strikers were speaking about the international connections as well. Because a lot of the time people only think about only in our locality what's going on. But these struggles have been together for a very long time. They've come together. There is a lot of parallel histories. I don't know if any of you have read my post today on the AMED Studies about last night's struggle. Why do we do this? Why are we teaching these topics? Why do we bring these conversations together? Why do we interact with people around the world? Because many people cannot, actually literally physically cannot be here, even if they wanted to, because there is the Muslim ban, there is visa ban, there is all sorts of ban. If people, even if they had the money to travel, they cannot actually be here. And we also cannot always travel and go wherever we need to go in order for us to learn. Please come in. Yes, I'll wait for you to come in.
Oh, thank you.
Please. Yes. Yes, come on in. So we try to be able to engage with each other in order to see if we can use the resources at our disposal, including social media, for us to connect with other people around the world. And I think this is also one of the genius ways in which people can come together and stretch the resources as much as possible. So this is also part of the reason we do open classrooms. We have no money, we have no staff, we have no budget. So what we do is we actually open our classrooms. The students learn more by engaging with other people, and we get so blessed and so honored by having amazing scholars and amazing community leaders to come and be with us. I wanted to, you don't have Sage? Do you have Sage? No, Tony, do you have Sage? No, okay. So I thought that maybe somebody will bring Sage, but I did. I brought Sage, and we always do this, by the way. We do this. I brought Sage. You have something to wear? Okay. So this is actually This is sage that we collected in March when we were in Palestine on the Teaching Palestine Pedagogical Praxis and the Indivisibility of Justice. We actually collected it from different parts in Palestine. So this is not just from one place. So we were in Hebron, in the old city of Hebron. We bought from the merchants. We were in the old city of Jerusalem. We bought from the women who were selling the sage on the street, on the old city, going into the old city of Jerusalem. We were in Ain Hod, which is a village near Haifa that has not been destroyed in 1948. In 1948, 531 to 32 villages, Palestinians were completely destroyed. This was a village that wasn't destroyed, but that was taken over and turned into an Israeli artist colony. And it's as violent or more violent than even the villages that have been destroyed. But we went and we picked, and it was me and my colleague and many others, Nanea Renteria, who teaches here in the College of Ethnic Studies. And so we went and we collected the sage. We collected some of the sage in Naqab, in the Palestinian Bedouin areas, and I know you've been there. I just saw the video last night in preparation for class. And we collected some of the sage in the north, from, I mentioned Haifa, from Akka. So we collected sage from different places, and we collect and we share, we save a little bit. And every single time we actually have an activity with indigenous communities, we share some of the sage. Because we are Sabwa, and that, sage in Arabic is called meramiya. Meramiya means the herb of Maryam, of Mary. It's a wild herb. It does not, you don't grow it, you just have to pick it. Because goes back to Mary, Mother of Christ. And I'm not talking about, the US Christians United for Israel or something. I'm talking about the people who, Jesus was one of the first Palestinians. So this is where the sage comes from. It's actually very sacred, very important and so on. So every single time we bring sage in order for us to be able to share. And so this is, and it's not put in like fancy containers or something. Usually the merchants wrap it in newspapers and this is how you bring it from one place to the other. So this is the sage that we are, honoring. And we're very honored tonight, and I will talk a little bit later on, but we are very honored tonight to be having a conversation in our class about indigenous communities and the American Indian movement, Standing Rock, and the struggles of people that continue to struggle day in and day out, despite centuries of attempts at genocide, centuries of attempts of elimination. Palestinians are actually inspired because Palestinians are very new in this scale, right? So only over 100 years. And so this is something that's quite important and quite honored. 50 years ago, the American Indian movement was founded. American Indian movement, like other movements for liberation here in the US, and in North America, I should say, in Turtle Island, like the Black Panther Party, like the Young Lords Party, like the Brown Berets, like many other movements were actually targeted by a program called COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program, that was devised by the FBI to destroy, to literally decimate and get rid of the leaders. There have been many struggles throughout the history. Students know about that. Last semester we actually had a very big event talking about 1492 to 1948, from indigenous Nakba to Palestinian Nakba. So we had a big event here, and so we do it all the time, and we think about it all the time, to think about what does this mean in terms of oppression as well as resistance. Tonight, we're very, very, very fortunate and very honored to be joined by one of the amazing fighters of the American Indian movement. If you remember 2 weeks ago, we had the 36th anniversary of the Sabra and Shatila massacre here. And one of the people who spoke was none other than Brother Tony Gonzalez, who is the representative of the American Indian Movement West. He's sitting right there, wearing a Palestinian kafiyeh. And he spoke about being in Beirut and meeting with the PLO. And I mentioned this for the people who were there, but some of you were not there last time, is that I heard about Tony in 2008 when we marked the 40th anniversary of the College of the strike, of the 1968 strike. And some of the young students, especially Palestinian students who were working with me, said, we really need to gather people, we need to kind of like build coalitions. And I said, well, there have been coalitions built for a very long time. And so we ended up inviting people to come. But I actually didn't really know. I had no idea that Tony was part of the people who had come to Palestine. So we had people from the Black Panther Party, we had people from Malcolm X grassroots movement, we had people from Lo Siente, we have everybody around the room. And by the way, the video is available online. And we videotape everything as we always do because it's part of the oral history, compiling oral histories and leaving the stuff to the people who are going to learn about it, pass it on, and so on. And we had younger people, older people having the discussion, and then it comes to Tony's turn. And Tony said, when I was in Beirut and met with Palestinian chairman Yasser Arafat, and I'm like, really? And so he talks about this, and we didn't have a chance to talk more about it. I talked to you a little bit afterwards. We were also joined at that time, if you remember, Phil Hutchins, who was with the Student Non-Violence Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And he was actually, I think he was the chairman of SNCC at the time, when they wrote the statement in support of Palestine. And of course, they lost all their funding and so on. And he was talking about what happened to him at the time. So there is all these, so we didn't have a chance to talk more with Tony until last Wednesday, I think, when you spoke to us. We marked the 36th anniversary of the massacre. Tony spoke about his own experience working with the Palestinians, being in Palestinian refugee camps, hanging out with young Palestinians, whom he met at a conference in Mexico, and they invited the American Indian movement, so he went and spent time with the Palestinians in Lebanon. So I'm still inviting students to engage and conduct more oral histories. 2 days ago, it was the Indigenous Peoples' Day in San Francisco, declared by the city of San Francisco. 1 day. Just like there is 1 day for Martin Luther King, there's one Black History Month. It's kind of like everybody gets a little bit a piece, kind of like you get your allotment, and then we think about what happens to the 11 other months, what happens to the rest of the year, what happens to the rest of humanity, and so on. It's really important to actually have Indigenous peoples. It was a huge accomplishment. And the American Indian organized the 8th annual film festival. And at the film festival, Tony asked if we could actually have some films on Palestine. So we showed 2 films. One short about Ahed Tamimi, the young Palestinian woman who was arrested, spent 8 months in prison with her mother, who was also accused of sedition because she's a videographer of the activities of Palestinians. And the other film about was children between the Haitian refugee camp in the West Bank and Shatila refugee camp in Beirut. They met at the border. And we have the film available. We show it sometime, but we didn't want to show it last week because we were already showing it at the Indigenous Film Festival. But the highlight of the film festival was actually showing the film Warrior Women, which was about the life, the struggle of Madonna Thunderhawk and warrior women who have been struggling in the American Indian movement at Wounded Knee, in Standing Rock, at various places for at Alcatraz. And so the film, we are hoping when it becomes more available, we don't have money now to pay, and we know they need to raise money for the film. So at some point we will bring it to San Francisco State and we will show it. But we were so fortunate to actually have Madonna Thunderhawk agree to come and speak. Okay. I mean, this is such a huge honor. It's a treat. I can't even describe how excited I am to be able, and how honored I am to have this amazing warrior woman come here and speak with us. So Madonna is going to, she was in Palestine, Marcos was there at the same time. So they're going to show a slideshow, half an hour, present what they've seen in Palestine. I will make some comments. I was going to do the 60, I can if you have questions about that, but I want to also use the experience. So if you want to ask me, this is the area that is my expertise, my area of research, my passion. So I'm more than happy to have discussions about that, but I want to make sure that we also have enough time for Madonna. So I will be responding to some of the stuff. I will be speaking about some of the Palestinian experiences that are parallel. And then we will open it up for people to speak, to converse, hold your questions until we finish presenting. And without further ado, I present you Madonna. Thank you. Marcos, you're going to do that, you're going to speak first, or
You know,
wanna?
we're winging this. They're
Yeah,
unrelated.
that's fine.
So the photographs are unrelated to, probably, we can speak a little bit about our trip, but if you'd like Madonna to say a few words.
I think I would,
Yeah.
would you wanna say a few words,
Sure,
and then we
sure.
show, and then we come back and
Yeah.
discuss?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, we went to Palestine, but for me, there's a lifelong, well, adult lifelong story. Back after 73, Wounded Knee in 73, that's when all the work really started, because the feds came after us full force, everybody was in court. That's routine that, you know, colonized governments do to people to, you know, they make you all criminals so that you can be in a court system. So while this was all going on, you gotta remember, it was back in the day when there was maybe landlines was about it. And straight press was all that was happening. And they were all, you know, of course, you know, straight redneck press, male dominated. So we didn't really know much of what was going on in the rest of the world. And we didn't know if anybody knew what was going on with us. But Wounded Knee kind of opened up, that kind of went worldwide, and we didn't realize it at the time, but it did. And afterward, we had a lot of support from around the world, mostly from indigenous people, and also people that were in land struggle. So we had a gathering one time in South Dakota at one of the towns there in South Dakota anyway. And different speakers came from different areas around the world. And one of the speakers we had was a Palestinian man. And he started talking, and it was, you gotta remember, we're pretty naive in those days. I mean, I was younger, of course, you know, we were younger adults, but as far as world politics and world happening, we were basically, you know, naive to what was going on. And of course, you know, there wasn't that much communication anyway. But to hear him talk, it was almost like he's telling a story of what happened to our people. So everybody kind of, you know, got everyone's attention then, and then we realized it just kind of gave us that global mind, you know, start thinking globally. Because this is, so it's a process then. It's not just us sitting here, you know, in the belly of the beast, you know, happening just to us. It's happening all over. It's a process. So ever since then, in my own mind, as one person, individual, that always stuck in my mind, because I thought, I guess I could say he was the one that kind of opened my eyes to the world, to start thinking globally. So ever since then, I was always, you know, trying to keep track of what was going on, what was happening, besides what was happening to us, but around the world. And also there was a man there from Ireland, when the Irish were fighting for their independence, and the north of Ireland was happening, and he came and talked. So those two countries stayed in my mind because they were still ongoing struggle. Hundreds of years for the Irish, hundreds. What, 800 years? Since they've been colonized, and they're still holding on, still fighting back. So, aside from everything else that was going on at home, I would think of those types of things. And then when the elder people in our treaty councils got together and told the American Indian movement, you gotta go to New York, you gotta go where the UN is, and you gotta tell them who we are, and you know, we want, let them know that we are part of the world community. We're still here. So that was kind of fit into that, what I learned from those meetings we had, and those two people that came from their countries. And so that, to me, that helped bring us along as American Indian movement in the United States, in our small land-based areas that we have, that continuing struggle is a global effort. So, but in the back of my mind, I always thought about, someday I'm gonna go there. Someday I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna go to Palestine, and I'm actually gonna touch their homelands. Because the land is what, that's the heart of it all. For all of us, indigenous, no matter where we're at on this planet. Last year, I got to go. Well, it was about this time of yesterday. They said, would you be interested in going with this group? We have these tours that we go twice a year, and we witness. We know it's apartheid over there, and we go as a group, and they're all Christians. We go as witnesses because, you know, we want the world to know, and we also want the Israeli government to know that we know, and we're from the United States, and we don't forget, we keep coming back. So I thought, what? To me, at my age, I thought, well, forget that dream, you know, that thing could never happen. And I thought, oh my God, I get to go. And in 2013, we got invited, my other daughter and I got invited to go to Ireland, where the support organization over there was honoring and doing an event for Leonard Peltier.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to go to Ireland. And I thought, oh man, this is amazing. Now, if only I'll get to go to Palestine, you know, before I get too old and forget who I am, forget everything that went on, you know. I just joking, I was thinking like that. And then I got this invitation to go. But before that, when everything was happening at Standing Rock, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of young people came and went. And I was there with some other elders. We were there in support. My sister and I stayed there we were there 6 months or so. And that's where I met Marcos. He came, he was anybody that came was a water protector, you know, automatic water protector. But he helped build and do a lot of things in camp. So after camp is when I got to know him pretty good, and because you kind of hang together, you know, especially after something like that happens, you know, you're so happy to see another water protector, you know, it's just like, Anyway, they came to South Dakota, and they came to my reservation, and so then I happened to be talking last year in Santa Rosa after the fires.
Yeah.
And that's where he was living. So he comes. So I told him, I said, I'm going to Palestine. He said, what? So we started talking, you know, so he says, well, yeah, hey, I think, well, maybe I'll go too. And I said, yes, please go, you know. So that's how he ended up okay. Of course, he had to watch my bag for me, and, you know, I didn't fall off the bus and stuff like that, you know. But it all turned out to be such a eye-opener and a learning experience. But not only that, we could bring it back, bring it home and let people know, you know. Because that's the main strength that indigenous have worldwide, and that solidarity and working and supporting each other in however way you can. So he's got all the pictures and stuff, and I'm just here.
Thanks. Hey everyone. I was not going to pass up on the opportunity to go to Palestine, let alone with my friend Madonna, let alone with the coalition that was going. We went with members of Black Lives Matter, JVP. We went with our Muslim brothers and sisters, our new friends that were from a mosque. So it was it was actually very challenging. It was hard at times. But there was close to 30 of us that traveled in Palestine for close to 3 weeks. and the sole purpose of the trip was to bear witness, and sometimes that's hard probably for me and Madonna, who are used to not being passive observers to pain and suffering. But we saw a lot of pain and suffering, but we also saw a lot of joy and beauty and solidarity in culture, and a lot of similarities for like Madonna said, the struggles in her community. And for myself, I'm the first generation son of an immigrant. My father is from Argentina, and I grew up, and my mother's from Oklahoma, and that has its own challenges. And Standing Rock, my existence as an American, if you're not challenging what your identity is right now as an American and what that means to you, I think it's time, and it's really important that we get to some baseline history of how we all find ourselves in this country. And my father grew up, we talked about politics all the time, and Israeli-Palestine was on the mind of Argentinians. Why? Because American interventionist policies in Argentina and in South America are horrendous, and fascist governments were propped up there, and my father was tortured in Argentina by fascist governments, and he just happened to find an American woman in South America and decided to come here, and that's how I wound up here. But it's always been on my mind. We've always discussed Israeli-Palestine as a huge injustice that our country supports. And so between my experiences that were incredibly formative being out at Standing Rock, I was asked to come there to support my Indigenous brothers and sisters, and fostering this friendship with Madonna, just the opportunity to go, I was like, yes, I would never want to go on a birthright tour and get the lens that we all of us already know what the Israeli generic perspective is. I would hope that most people in this room know that perspective, but what I didn't know was just how welcoming the Palestinians would be. As an American who represents, I'm a citizen of the country that is paying for the genocide and the apartheid, and yet everywhere we went, we were, we had wonderful dinners, we listened to music, we shared stories, and we spoke to people at great length and spent time in their homes. And so it was a really powerful and formative experience. And Madonna had that lineage to her struggle that brought her there. And I had it just because I've been questioning what my part and my complicity in these things are. And having that knowledge from my father, who was an activist who fled his country for a better life, again, fled his country because of policies of the United States. So I'm starting with, basically, I think one of the biggest things that people say is that it's not an apartheid. And so I have a set of pictures. I have a ton of pictures, so it's really hard. We threw this together very last minute, so you'll have to forgive me. But I feel like the places, and Doctor, you'll probably talk about this, different parts of Palestine are experiencing different parts and different types of genocide and apartheid in a different timeline, and there's different tactics in all the different regions. The Golan Heights is a different type of tactic. The West Bank is a different tactic. How the apartheid is being unrolled in its policies is different in Gaza than it is in other places, and it's certainly different. It has a lineage to South Africa, but it is wholly different in all the individual places. It is more technologically advanced. It has learned from South African apartheid, but it is indeed an apartheid. And so I'll start the slideshow. There's a website called Palestine Remembered, which is an incredible resource where people post photographs and have a concentrated cultural lineage to the information. So this is a village. This is a constant thing that you see in Palestine and de facto Israel, there's a whole identity that's related to Israeli identity that is reliant on the fact that you have to obscure a whole bunch of history that actually happened. And how do you do that? Well, you either pretend that it's not there, but the easiest way is to make it just disappear. And so when we talk about the Israelis occupying that land, and there is a Zionist saying, which is a land for a people.
A land without people for a people without a land.
Thank you. And there's this idea that the Israelis arrived, and this is the lineage to the American Indian movement and the struggles here in the United States. We didn't just arrive to a land devoid of people. So this is the village of Safaria. This is a photograph from 1931. And it's a beautiful, thriving village. You can see down below, you can see the olive trees. You can see that this is a village that's existed for thousands of years. It has roads, it has systems, there are farms. And at the very top, you can see a watchtower that is from a Roman era. This is Roman construction. And we were there, this is outside of Nazareth?
No, Haifa.
Haifa, okay. And so we're looking at this photograph. We're with writer and journalist Jonathan Cook. And so these are the things that really stood out to me. So I'll just, as exemplary things that are, this is apartheid, this is cultural genocide, but Israelis don't see this. They don't know. So here we are, we're standing in the position of a graveyard, we're looking at the photographs of this hill, and the way that you can tie this together is that the Israelis did not destroy the Roman watchtower. You can see it there on the hill. And that sets the position. But what you do see are all these beautiful trees. And there's this thing that Israelis say all the time, which is, we made the desert bloom. It's a phrase that they say a lot. And this is really difficult if your identity is related to a lot of the efforts around creating your history and your identity. One of the organizations in the United States, I'm going to back up for a second, the Jewish National Fund. The Jewish National Fund organizes capital here in the United States. Now it does so under the guise of saying, we're helping the desert bloom. I have Jewish friends of mine growing up that would do bake sales and would do raffles and whatnot for the JNF. And I'd say, hey, what are you up to? Oh, we're doing this, we're doing this big fundraiser for a JNF to plant trees in Israel. Well, so you look at this hillside and you see these trees. They're all contiguous. They're all equally spaced. They're all the same age. They're all the same type of tree. And you'll see this, once you know this, when you travel throughout Palestine, you will see it everywhere. We met tour guides, Palestinian tour guides, that I said, where are you from? And they said, well, I'm from Jerusalem. I'll never get to go back there, or maybe one day. But my home is now a park. And this is really consistent. So the JNF, a huge fund that has been organizing capital in the United States for a long time, they plant trees all over Israel. You see a forest like that and you say, well, that's a beautiful forest. I want to go traipse around in the forest. But that forest, you'll notice, you see something like that in the United States, you say, oh, that's logging, right? You can tell that forest is not a natural forest. But if you're not looking for it, Israelis are not looking for this. They don't know that even people in that neighborhood at Safaria, they don't know that that village was there. They think that that architecture is from a different era, that it's from the Turks, that it's Roman, that no one was there. If you've only been there one generation through birthright to come there and settle that land, you wouldn't know that history. But the locals do, the Palestinians do. So this is the efforts of the JNF. This really stood out to me. This really was triggering for me, and this is why I took these photographs. Totally benign. You'd be traveling by on a bus. You wouldn't know what you're looking at. You're like, oh, look, there's a forest off in the distance. But you start looking underneath the forest canopy, and you see all those trees are equally spaced. And you'll see this everywhere, from tip to bottom of Israel, we saw this. And underneath, when you start looking, you start to see the stones and the rubble of walls, of villages that were there for thousands of years. So this is one of the ways that we obscure history and Israel. This was really powerful for me, was the physical things of actually burying that history underneath forests. And how that was organized in the United States, literally, like I'm saying, I have friends of mine, Jewish friends, that, you know, they put their money in a piggy bank to help do this. So that was really powerful for me. So, you know, now that I hit you guys with that stuff, we had a great time in Palestine as well. We ate kanafa if you guys ever get a chance to go, and I
From
urge
my hometown.
yes, and if I urge you to go, this is I don't even know what's in it. It's like cheese and sugar and crack cocaine. Or I apologize. It's all natural ingredients. It's delicious. So.
Oh, this is Nablus too.
Yeah, this is in Nablus.
Oh my God, I know.
Yeah, this is out front of one of the stores, you know, and you cruise by and you can
The
have
old
some.
city? Is this the old city?
Uh-huh, yeah. So, yeah, cultural artifacts. I believe you're modeling some of the wares. This is in.
It's like one of my designs anyway. Of one
Yeah,
of
the weaving was very similar the world over. It seemed like there's that connection there. So this is we're in Jerusalem. This is Jaffa Gate. This is the main entrance. Just with the way that the Israelis have sort of divided up Israel, this is the main entrance for basically at this point for Palestinians. Most Palestinians come in from this direction to go to prayer in the old city. And you'll notice down below, it's subtle. Again, if you're just a tourist and you don't know what you're looking for and you don't have somebody explain to you, you wouldn't notice the soldiers in the lower corner. You'd be like, oh, these are soldiers. Well, as it turns out, these specific soldiers, they have a different term and a different title. They're called border police. And so you'd be like, well, what are the border police? Well, the border police are apparently protecting the green line, or the border that was established in, 67, right? If you know where the green line is and where that border was secured, you know that Jaffa Gate is nowhere near the green line, and they are well into what's considered still Palestinian territory. But, you know, international criminal courts aside, you know, you just put up a gate and you walk around with automatic weapons. You can do pretty much whatever you want. And so they're just hanging out there. If and when you travel to Palestine, I suggest you do not take photographs of soldiers. It is very dangerous to do so. And, you know, I'm risking my own well-being and the well-being of who you travel with to take photographs like this. I've shot photographs in a lot of interesting situations, I'll put it at that. So this is not a great photograph, but I just want to show you because this is the main entrance. So, you know, if you're white, if you're a tourist, if you're Israeli, you just cruise through there. But basically, this is racial profiling. That's what they do. They just profile people and they harass people. And this is the lead up to the day of prayer, which is Friday. Is that correct? Right? So Thursday night, the border patrol start putting out these gates and they start harassing people. I have a story about that. You know, there was a kid in a hoodie and they threw him up against the wall, and one of our travelers was an older white woman from Connecticut, and she said, what do we do? They're beating that kid up. And I said, we do nothing. this was her first time experiencing racial profiling. But it was a kid. He could have been Trayvon Martin. He literally was a Palestinian kid wearing a black hoodie, and the Border Patrol had him up against the wall. And I have a crappy photograph of it, but I decided to skip on it. But the city, the old city of Jerusalem is really beautiful, and one of the things that you see is that there are churches and mosques and synagogues just wall to wall. So this idea that there has never been peace or that the religions don't coexist is also ridiculous. The division between the idea of religious war and keeping those divisions, they all share the same prophets. I say this as an atheist too. I'm just somebody that studies this stuff. It's really compelling because there are plaques and there are situations where you'll see in the old city that a mosque is working with a Christian organization to do a rebuilding project. You see these things, but so this is just a picture at night, and during the day it's bustling. All the stores open up. This is the old city of Jerusalem. If you believe the history from the Old Testament and the books, this is where it all takes place. This is where Jesus, supposedly carried his cross. This is where all these trials and tribulations that we deal with in the world are on these streets and on these cobblestones.
And this is the spice market that you're looking. The sign says the spice market.
In the old city of Jerusalem. Yeah. So this was another moment for me that was really compelling as a form of apartheid. I had a young, a new Muslim traveler friend to me, my friend Samir. Because I'm half white and my father's from Argentina, I can catch a tan. I feel like most cultures have tried to claim me over the years. No matter where I go, people go, "Are you that thing?" So we had talked in our hotel room that I could probably come to prayer with them. So I want to emphasize that my new Muslim brothers, who I had told, they know I'm an atheist. I'm a recovering Catholic, if you will. They invited me to the holiest day of prayer in one of the holiest places for Muslims, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock. But I would go with them. I would stand up. I would do what they would do. I would bow. Anybody who's been in church, you kind of get the program. I think I could figure it out. So we had hatched this plan. But the reality is that there was no way I would be able to go, and it's not because my Muslim friends would not allow me to be there, but it's because there is a Israeli armed checkpoint that will literally stop you and make you recite the Quran to prove that you're Muslim. This is apartheid. This is keeping the two populations apart. This keeps the Israelis from ever speaking to Palestinians, from ever merging these worlds. This is, again, I don't suggest you take pictures of soldiers. There's just a little thing I want to point out. I mean, this is a soldier clearly holding M16, M4 carbine, some American weaponry derivative. I just want to point that out as we have these conversations about gun rights, and we talk about these things in the United States. This is where our tax money goes. Yes.
Do you mind turning on the TV behind you with the controller?
We tried. If somebody is technical enough to do that, it wasn't working. Can you see it from here?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a little side note. I want to point that out. That's your American dollars at work. Is a guy with an M16 half raised, pointing it as Muslims as they go by to prayer, to separate the populations. So on this day, I was not able to go to Alaska. So this is Madonna walking through the.
This is Money Changer.
So I threw that in there for a reason, because Madonna said the money changers. So Madonna can talk about her experience with the way Christianity is presented in our country and what it did to indigenous people in the boarding schools here to strip her people from their culture. But one of the stories that she remembers, and I think you were talking about, is Jesus throwing the bankers and the money changers. He was, Jesus was a Palestinian socialist. So anyways, I just thought that moment was great, that here we are in the heart of where this took place, and Madonna was commenting on that. So that's why I threw that in there. This is Jaffa Gate. We're walking towards the into the old city. We're in Hebron now, speaking of the different types of apartheid in their different lineage of timeline. Jerusalem is hotly contested land. There is symbols of apartheid everywhere, but peak apartheid, I mean the cattle cages, the checkpoints, all that stuff. Hebron is a huge example of that. And a lot of this came to a head and got a lot more serious in Hebron after the massacre at the Ibrahimi Mosque in, was that 94? 94. And so here's just a simple interaction. Here's an old man who only speaks Arabic and two young soldiers who are running a checkpoint who only speak Hebrew. And this man he's a local. He's a local from Hebron, and he literally has a card with a number on it. This is his indigenous land, and he has a card. And so this soldier is holding his identification in his left hand. He's already handed it to him. But you can see where he's gesturing. He's saying, "No, I want you to give it to me here in the middle. Come over here, old man, and give it to me in the middle." These are the daily slights. This is an old man who could, otherwise probably whoop these kids. He has a lifetime of knowledge. This is his neighborhood. And here he is having to show his papers and do so in a way that these two kids with weapons like, in order for him to gain passage or move by. So I started photographing this interaction. We started filming this interaction. These two soldiers realized they were being filmed. They asked us in English not to. We continued to. They let the old man go on his way, and then we went on our way as well. But again, things are increasingly more dangerous in terms of doing these things. And we can talk about, on a very basic level, whether or not Israel is even accountable to the United States anymore. There's seemingly not. So we went to the Ibrahimi Mosque. The Ibrahimi Mosque is the mausoleum of Abraham, the prophet Abraham, which is the shared prophet of the three major religions within the context of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And this church has been open to many different religions for, 1,500 years, 1,200 years. This has been a common place to go to see Abraham. A New York settler came into the mosque in. This is another conversation. Madonna came to the mosque and decided to not come into the mosque because she was being asked to cover her hair. And I know that indigenous people have fought hard and literally had their hair cut. So this means something to Madonna, to be respectful, to not go into the mosque, but also to not cover her hair. And I know that including the Muslim women that were on our trips, some wear the hijab because it's important to say, I get to choose to wear the hijab, and some women don't want to wear the hijab because they're in areas where they're forced to do so. And to me, this was a feminist statement of Madonna, observing cultural norms, but also doing what she needed to do to protect her the cultural norms that she fought hard for. So Madonna stayed behind, and we went in, our coalition of Christians. We were all invited to go into the Muslim side. After the massacre in 1994, the Israeli forces used this as an excuse to divide the mosque in half. Well, I would say 3/4. The Muslim side is 1/4 of the size of the rest of it. And they basically gave this other side that hadn't been Jewish for, I don't know, you can speak to this, thousands of years or 1,200, 1,500 years, something in that neighborhood. It was given back to the settlers. So this was a huge victory. 29 people were massacred by this settler. And so they said, okay, the Israelis, things are too dangerous, we're going to divide the mosque. And so the settler had stepped into this doorway here while this was a day of prayer. And let's see here. Yeah, 29 people were killed while they were praying, literally kneeling. And so we're here with this history and context in mind. And Madonna's outside, and we're with our group, and a soldier walked in the doorway with an M16. Again, I want to point out the weapon in shoes. Yeah, and I want to point out that, of course, this is clearly a weapon of American origin. So he steps into the doorway, and the Muslim friends of ours, of course, become extremely nervous. Knowing this history that took place in this mosque in 1994, that wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. So the Israelis were deciding that they were going to do a police training exercise in the mosque. Can you imagine any other situation where that would be okay? Can you imagine Palestinians going in with weapons into a place of worship for an alternate religion? I mean, this is just crazy on all levels. This is in shoes. Yeah,
You're not supposed to go in shoes when
and they put down mats, whatever. But these are soldiers. They're armed to the teeth, and so we all huddled around our brothers and sisters. Again, I'm an atheist, but I've stood in front of cops a lot, and we made these cops know that their presence was not okay, and that we were not okay with this. So we got together and stood around in front of the cops while our Muslim brothers and sisters continued praying. But these are the kinds of things that go on every day. So the Israelis are doing live training exercises in Muslim territories, in Palestinian villages. They do this all the time. So this was just an example that I was present for. So we walked through the market of Hebron. We met with some of the heads of Youth Against Settlements, and we walked through the market. And the market would be wonderful if it were not for the fact that there were soldiers pointing guns at us from perches here and there. And we asked, what is the nets for? What's the cages? Well, through all sorts of trickery and whatnot, Israelis have built settlements and have purchased the upper buildings above the market. And so they will throw rocks and feces down on the Palestinian market. So, instead the Israelis keep watch, but they built a cage. And so there's tarps and whatnot.
And not all the places were purchased, actually. Some of them were taken over for settlement.
Right, and so this is the work of Youth Against Settlements, which is to take back some of these houses, and they have been able to do that. But the settlers come in, not unlike they did in the Ibrahimi Mosque, and they just shoot up the place. They do that, and the Israeli soldiers come and then protect them on the exit of these atrocities. So these are the tactile forms of apartheid. This is time, energy. These are cages. This is welding. This is money. It comes from somewhere. The weapons are American oftentimes. Not anymore. There's a burgeoning Israeli weapons industry now that is taking off. And so these are a lot of the market stalls that can't do business anymore. Business isn't what it used to be. You have to go through checkpoints and cages, and if you're going to Israel and you want to go to Tel Aviv to go to a party or something, that's much more compelling than, hey, let's go through checkpoints in Hebron. But I urge you to do it. I urge you to go and see for yourself. So these are a lot of the neighborhood stalls that are closed. And even in Hebron, I will say that this is just a brief moment of kindness. So there were some men sitting out in front of a store, and Madonna needed to take a break. And so these gentlemen, not expecting us to pay money or whatever, but they put out a chair for her. Yeah. So it's clear we're Americans. It's clear that they know the history that is happening and befalling them, and yet these little moments of kindness. This is really important. I want to show you that because I want you to go, and I want you to understand that. And also in this final frame, more forms of apartheid. If you didn't know you were looking for it, this is a separate license plate system for Palestinians in their cars. There are certain roads that Israelis get to drive on. If you have a green and white plate, you are a Palestinian. There is a separate set of laws. There are separate roads. There are separate systems for tracking you. This is the last functioning kufiyah factory in Hebron. We were having a good time. Again, we were welcomed with open arms to come and shop and check things out. I mean, we're literally walking around on the factory floor. I said to myself with Madonna, I said, if we ever go back, I want to there's some young guys working, and I'm a fabricator, I do engineering and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I want to get these young guys these headphones with the Bluetooth, you know what I mean, so that they can listen to music. It's so loud, I don't even know if it might be hard for the TV, but I'll play it for you. These machines are probably from the 1950s, I don't know. They make kufiyahs of all styles and shapes and sizes, but the machines in and of themselves are a testament to Palestinians. There's embargoes on everything, materials and whatnot. So these machines, they're working like that, clacking away every day. They're probably from the 1950s, just from the looks of them. I mean, I have hundreds and thousands of photographs. I have tons of stories. But I wanted to end on this. You know what this is. This is a checkpoint. This is a wall. And I want to bring it back to the current climate around politics, and that when Trump is talking about the wall, he's literally talking about Israeli companies that are contracted to make prototypes for those walls. Racism that we experience and its execution here is transferred from fascist governments, from racist governments all over the world, and Israel is a hotbed for technology, for abusing people, because they have actionable intel. They can say, hey, we sprayed these people with these chemicals and they behaved in this way. These bullets really mess people up. These walls and checkpoints work and don't work. And so the walls and the barricades that we saw at Standing Rock, they were designed with the technology developed to imprison Palestinians. The reason why police are so deadly, why they're so in a panic, why they're so militarized, they train with the IDF. Every police department in the United States trains with the IDF. And one of the biggest training conferences that happens here in the United States, Urban Shield, Israeli operatives come and they train police departments on how to take people down and how to be aggressive in a crowd, do crowd control, all these things. So, when Trump's talking about a wall, it may be something like this, but we're literally talking about shared racist technology the world over, and a lot of that stuff is being brutalized and tested on Palestinians, and lo and behold, it's coming to the United States and being used on our populace. So that's another reason why you should care. You should care as Americans about that struggle. I'm going to wrap it. Yeah. Anyways, it was hard, but it was a pleasure for me to go to Palestine. It was really incredible to be received with such love in the face of what I represent to them, and what you and all of us have a responsibility for. I urge you all to go and to see that side of it. There are plenty of organizations organizing trips to go, and you should go. Yeah, thanks for letting me speak.
Okay, so I was actually going to show you some slides from another trip to Palestine, but while I'm getting some support, showing this.
I'm unplugged.
PowerPoint. I just did it actually while you were speaking, so I thought kind of compare.
Okay.
All right, so I was just actually thinking about just elaborating on what Marcus was saying, some of the stuff, and then I want to I'm sure you want to comment, and then I think maybe Tom. Okay, so I wanted to just begin where add to some of the stuff that Marcos said. One is you spoke about different parts of Palestine being subjected to different things. Yes, so just for people who do not know, the Palestinian reality today exists in terms of the timeline. There is the question of the land that was taken over in 1948 when Israel was founded, that's 70 years ago. And that area includes Palestinians that are, we call them 48 Palestinians, because that's what happened in 1948. But that includes Palestinians living in villages, cities, as well as Palestinians who are living in some are being displaced now. There are at least 250,000 who are internally displaced within their own land, okay? Including some of the people that Marcos talked about when he spoke about the forests that are being grown by the Jewish National Fund. So for example, one of the villages that we showed a video of in April, on April 1492 to 1948, it's online as well. And we had, my memory, short-term memory is blocked. But I'm trying to remember, what's the name of the poet that we've had? I will get it in a minute. But anyway, so that was one of the villages that wasn't destroyed, that I mentioned. We've got some of Ain Hod. And one of the elders in Ain Hod, whom we visited before we went to see the artist colony, the people of the village are now living in another place, not on their own village. And he was telling us how much he hates, let's go. Yeah, he said he hates these pine trees because they, in order for them to plant the pine trees for the Jewish National Fund, they had to pull the apple, the orange orchards, the olive trees, and so on. And this is kind of like, now is the olive season in Palestine. Now I'm seeing all my friends sitting down like picking olives and they're pressing it. So I just emailed my brother this morning. It's like, hey, make sure when my share of the olives comes, ship it right away because I wanna eat it when it's still like sharp. It's usually like very, very sharp and spicy when the new oil comes, the olive oil comes in. But they pulled a lot of olive trees in, and the olive trees, it takes 7 years for the olive tree to actually bear fruit. It does not happen right away. So what they do is the Israeli soldiers go and pull out the olive trees and deprive people of livelihood. Now within the West Bank, which is occupied in 1967, not in 1948, the olive trees are now the settlers, the colonists come in, and they either steal, that the Palestinian peasants pick up the olives, they spread it, because the next day they're going to go press it and process it. Some becomes olive oil, some becomes olives to eat. Some, if you don't, you make it into soap, because there's olive oil soap and so on. And so they leave it so they can come back to it. So the settlers come and they steal the olives, or they'll burn the olive trees. So this is every time. If you go to visit Palestine in October, this is the stories you will hear again and again and again and again. More and more. I mean, even the taxi driver, you can just ask and people will start telling you these stories. The third part, the West Bank and Gaza were both occupied in 1967. So in 1967, the remaining part of Palestine is occupied by Israel. The West Bank gets attached to Jordan as a result of an agreement between the Israelis and the King Abdullah of Jordan at the time to kind of like take over Palestine and basically eliminate anything called Palestine. And Gaza gets under the jurisdiction of Egypt. It doesn't get annexed to Egypt, but it's under the jurisdiction of Egypt. Now, what happened to the rest of the Palestinians from 1948? Because in 1948, 750,000 to 800,000 Palestinians are expelled, are basically driven out of their land at gunpoint as a result of massacres, as a result of multiple things. And I mean, we can talk about history, people. We've talked about it before, but we can talk about it some more. But I want to make sure that we have the time for discussion. What happened to these people? These people become refugees. They are driven from the north of Palestine towards Lebanon, from the center of Palestine towards the West Bank, and from the southern part of Palestine to Gaza. Now, if you go to, and you went to the Naqab, right? You visited the people in Naqab who are being driven out of their homes again, yet displaced again by the Israeli government, which is another kind of displacement that's happening inside for Israeli citizens, people who are Israeli citizens. If you go to Naqab and you talk to people, actually, they have families that are living very, very close by in Gaza or in Hebron, because it's the same area in the southern part of Palestine. So they're relatives. So when you talk to people, they're actually the same, but each part has been occupied in different times, and each part lives under different jurisdiction. So Palestinians who came, let's say, from Naqab area, who got displaced and had to end up in Gaza, live in refugee camps in Gaza. And there are Palestinians who are in Hebron, and who are Palestinians inside the Naqab, and each one of them is part of different kind of borders. So they can't actually have family reunification and see each other. So this is kind of a continuous, permanent treat, and that you hear about, and you do not realize until you get there to see that the hills are actually quite close to each other. These are the same communities. Then the other part is not only ended up in refugee camps in Gaza, but also in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. So now today we have 5 million Palestinian refugees. And if you've been paying attention to the news, in early September, Trump came out and said that we're going to eliminate United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees. And he questioned how many refugees are there, as if it's a bargaining chip. It's kind of like, let's sit down and make a deal. And people have been saying, for over 70 years, we're not selling out our rights. We're not selling out our right to the land. We're not going to give up our right. We want to return. We want to return to the lands of our ancestors, okay? This is our right. It's our right that's guaranteed to us by international, by rights. This is our right. We want to return and so on. So there is the different parts of the Palestinian question about different areas and so on. So that's one aspect of it. And of course, Jerusalem 67 was occupied. The second part you mentioned is Safuriya. Safuriya is the village of the young Palestinians, some of the young Palestinians in the Shatila refugee camp. But before it was destroyed, there were all the stuff that you've mentioned and so on. And I think it's really, I want to just like say something about we made the desert bloom. Because it's, if you look at the Torah, if if you look at the Bible, if you look at the Quran, there is all these verses after verses after verses about figs and olives and grapes. If it was a desert, where did this come from? I mean, did people invent it today and put it back in the Torah of 2,000 years ago, or the Bible 2,000? Where this is, see, these verses are in holy books. So it wasn't really they call it barren land. There was nobody there, but it is also part of the Israeli narrative, which is very similar to the settler colonial project on the EDS, or the settler colonial project in the Pacifica or anywhere else. The ways in which we came and we developed. These people who lived there are unworthy, not of the land, because you know the land doesn't belong to anybody. The land, we belong to the land. The land belongs to everyone, right? But it's not the land. They are not worthy to be living in these beautiful areas and so on, and we're going to come and develop them and modernize them and bring industries and do all of these things, and then we're going to live in it. So it's the same kind of discourse, of civilizational discourse, where people who are indigenous are called savages, barbarians, and so on. So this is kind of, when they say we want to make the desert bloom, they are implying that the people who are indigenous people of the land actually are unworthy and are not, quote unquote, developed enough. This is also people study development theory. I direct you to Arturo Escobar's very, very great book called The Making and the Unmaking of the Third World, and there are other people, so he talks about what does development mean. But if you hear about it, you hear about developed countries, least developed countries, and then if they want to really be generous, they call it developing countries, in the process of developing, because some countries have already been developed. Okay, so it's very, very interesting to think about that, but this is very much part of the Israeli. The Jewish National Fund, actually we went to another village in the south of Palestine, in Naqab, called Hiran. Hiran is a village in Naqab of the Bedouin Palestinians that's threatened by destruction. And the Jewish National Fund is building in its place a settlement called Hiran. And then I'm not going to talk about the Knafe now, I can talk about it some other time. I wanted to also mention a couple of others. Oh, yeah, and you mentioned border police in Jerusalem. The reason there is border police in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is supposed to have been annexed by Israel, and is supposed to be part of Israel, not part of the West Bank. So in Jerusalem, there is different parts of let's say disciplinary mechanisms. There is the Israeli military, but there is also the Israeli police. Because it's supposed to be part of Israel, not part of the West Bank. The West Bank is where the military occupation, so the Israeli military. But Jerusalem is supposed to be up there. So it's, it's police, but actually there is two different laws that apply within Jerusalem, aside from the whole apartheid system, is that for Palestinian children, for example, they become adults earlier on and they get treated as adults by Israeli military, while Israeli Jewish children do not get that inside Jerusalem itself. You mentioned the whole Muslim-Christian thing, and I wanted to mention in 2014, in Gaza, where Gaza was being bombed, the mosques were all destroyed, and there were the Eid came, the Muslim Eid came, and the churches invited the Muslims to come and hold the Eid prayers inside, and people did. And there is always people like celebrate and mark their dead and everything together, because one of the things about the Palestinian movement that's actually from the 60s, and today I was going to talk about the 1968 Palestinian Charter, the PLO Charter in 1968, actually called for a secular democratic state in Palestine. And the reason they said in Palestine, the reason they said secular is not secular the same way as the French quote unquote secularism, that's anti-Muslim, anti-Islamophobia, Islamophobic that comes out, but actually as an antidote to Zionism that says that Zionism is going to establish an exclusive Jewish state. So when they said secularism, it was Palestine for everybody who lives in it. And if you look at the Palestinian Charter, and they call it covenant, which is not, it's not really the title for it. Somebody named in English, came in English and called it covenant, but it's actually charter. Palestinian National Charter of 1968 actually talks about the land for Muslims, Christians, and Jews to live together peacefully in one place, enjoy each other's rights. And so when they say secular, it's actually an antidote to Zionism. It's not an Islamophobic thing. So I think it's really important for today's discussion. And the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, I wanted to say that this actually happened after Oslo. So this happened after the Palestine Liberation Organization and the Israeli government signed an agreement. So when Baruch Goldstein, this doctor from Brooklyn, went into the Ibrahimi Mosque and shot 29 worshippers who were worshiping, killed them, it was after Israel was supposed to be, there's supposed to be peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But as a result, and Marcus was talking about the way the Ibrahimi Mosque was divided, and it's true that there is many times you cannot go in as a Muslim or non-Muslim to the Jewish side, which is supposed to be the Jewish side, which is for settlers. Okay, but afterwards, what they did, the Israeli and the U.S. came and imposed something called H1H2 treaty. And H1H2 treaty divided Hebron into multiple areas, basically legitimized the Israeli military presence in Hebron. So anywhere you go in Hebron, there is the gates. Everywhere you go, anywhere you want to go from the old city to the outside. And actually, I wanted to say, you were talking about embroidery, but I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. This is the scarf I bought from the women of Hebron. Okay, it says here, women in Hebron. And it's an old workshop in the old city of Hebron that's run by a women's cooperative. The women's cooperative is run by a woman named Layla. And when we were working in the old city of Hebron, the Palestinian who was one of the people who works with Defense of Children International about the Palestinian prisoner, he says to us, Layla is early warning signal. I said, what is early warning signal? Layla, whenever the settlers come to the old city of the Jews of Hebron or the military or something, she actually sends a signal for people to go inside and lock, the stores and so on, because they come and they start ruining and destroying and killing people and so on. So it's not just like the barbed wire where they throw feces and thing. And actually there is a merchant there that we've met him in 2011, where the delegation, the Indigenous and Women of Color Feminist delegation, on which was Yatawin was, Angela Davis, and many other people. And he was holding his child, and his child has lost his eye because of the attacks of the settlers. So it is not only that, it's also they are going to deprive people of livelihood. So the old city of Hebron, actually, there's 2,000 shops that are closed. Because after Baruch Goldstein went and committed the massacre, the Israeli military came and closed down, punished the people of the old city of Hebron, and closed down their shops. Hebron is one commercial part of the West Bank. Hebron and Nablus in the north, Hebron in the south, are the commercial. Hebron is the bread basket of Palestine because, the fruit basket. They produce grapes, they produce apples, they produce pears, tomatoes, all of this stuff. And so what Israel did, one is that they closed the shops, 2,000 shops, completely closed. So you can see it, when you see around, you'll see Hebron Ghost City, because it's like closed completely. And this is where Layla will go and warn them. And it's a device to protect people, but it's actually part of this military occupation, military presence. But also on top of it, during the Aqsa Intifada of 2000, what Israel did is they actually prevented the big tankers that carry vegetables and fruits and so on to even go and get exported. First of all, you cannot get to the north of the West Bank because now Jerusalem, there's the wall, there's multiple checkpoints and so on, so you can't go there. You cannot get exported to Jordan because they closed the border between, so you cannot export that. And the way to get from one place to another is called Wadi Nar, the Valley of Fire. And it's like almost 45 degrees. So when the tankers get in and they break, this is it. The fruits sit and they rot in a couple of days and so on. This is also part of the economic slow strangulation of any kind of livelihood for people, even peasants who are trying farmers to try to exist. Okay, so I want to show you some of the slides, not a lot. Shall I just click? Okay, all right. So this is part of a mural that I didn't have. Oh my God, I'm sorry, this is like a very badly, See, I was just doing it while Marcus was speaking to speak. This is one of the people who were killed. Okay. No, I'm just going to go up. I think it's. I'm just going to share a few things, not all of it. Just to complement what Marcus said.
If you double click them, it's full screen, but
Okay. So this was the Day of the Land. This was the March 30th. This is when we ended our delegation this time. And if you pay attention to what's happened to the Great March of Return in Gaza, it started on March 30th. March 30th is the Land Day in Palestine. Land Day in Palestine started in 1976, when Palestinians inside Israel said enough is enough. Israel is taking more and more land from Israeli citizens. I'm not talking even about the West Bank or Gaza. This is actually citizens of Israel that Israel was taking more. And they began and they revolted. And so Gaza Great March of Return began on March 30th, this past year, 2018, and ended on May 15th, supposed to have ended. On May 15th, 2018, which is the 70th anniversary of Nakba. Okay? So what we did, we ended our delegation, the last day was on the Land Day, and we went and actually visited, I'll show you, the graves. I'm sorry about this lousy computer, so just bear with me. Okay, so what do I do with this? Okay, so this is the graves of, in 1976, 6 Palestinians who were unarmed civilians marched for the Land Day and they were killed. So in Sakhnin, which is a village near Nazareth, they have a big monument for them. And when you want to march in the Land Day, you stop, honor the monument, which is you honor the dead, the people who passed on, and then you walk from where to Arabe, where this was the big, and they called it, I think, Mahmoud Darwishia. Okay, this is the Israeli member of Knesset. Her name is Hanin Zo'bi. She has been actually banned. She's a member of the Israeli parliament. She cannot speak. She's not allowed to speak. Her colleagues, the Israeli members of the Israeli, actually passed a resolution. She cannot speak. She can sit there and vote, but she's not allowed to speak because she has spoken many times in favor of Palestinian rights. In 2014, when Gaza was being bombed and there were demonstrations, Israeli demonstrations, one of the demonstrations actually called for her rape, publicly. I mean, publicly, I can share with you what's going on. And of course, nobody was punished. Okay, this is, I mentioned to you, this is me and Nanaya picking up sage in Ain Hod. Okay, here we are meeting with a Palestinian man and his grandchild Arif in a city, in an area called Sheikh Jarrah of Jerusalem, that's being taken over. Actually, their homes are being taken over. Oh, thank you. They are being taken over, the homes. Oh, technology and smart here. It's coming from. It's ancient. So the land is being taken over, and the houses, and next door in their homes, settlers live. They throw on them feces, they yell at them. One of the guys next door neighbor, his name is Nabil Al-Kul, he was bitten by one of the settlers' dogs. So he called the hot doctor, the Israeli doctor. The doctor says, how is the dog? Never mentioned about it. And this is next door. Actually, you can see the delegation was made up of people from South Africa, from Haiti, from in the US, from different places. Okay, you just
press that
okay.
arrow.
So what do I do?
Just press that.
Okay,
Just press
yeah.
this and it goes back.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is from 2000. This is, you see Angela Davis. Oh, how do I do it?
So
Yeah.
you just press the arrows, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is from 2011. The reason I put this in, this was the indigenous and women of color feminist delegation. This was the town, Angela Davis, Beverly Gishaftan. But this is what I really wanted to put. These are, talk about the 60s. These are the women who were arrested. There was 18 women who were arrested in 1968-69 because they were all part of militant Palestinian resistance. And they spent many years in prison, and they were only released as a result of prisoner exchange. So when we went there, after we finished, Maryam, she held hands with Angela Davis because people could not believe that Angela Davis was in Palestine. Held the hand with Angela Davis and started singing "We Shall Overcome." And so, some people who are coming from the US thinking, "We shall go overcome" is a bit of a kumbaya moment, what does this mean, and so on. But Then she didn't explain then. When we went in 2016 on the prisoner delegation, she sat at the table with Hank Jones, who was a former prisoner, Emery Douglas, who was one of the Black Panthers newspaper, and she started explaining why we shall overcome. She said that when they were in prison, and the women will feel like so oppressed by the prison authorities, they will try to sing revolutionary songs that they knew. And We Shall Overcome was one of them. And they knew every single word. Like, most of the people of the delegation did not really know everything, but they knew every single word. So for them, the context, and I think it's really important because people think about the context of resistance, that is exactly the same. It doesn't mean the same in every context. For them, it was like, this is a revolutionary song of people who are struggling, Black Power movement in the US. They weren't thinking about the various differences in the US within the movement, what it meant and so on. So it was really kind of like amazing to have that discussion. Here, this is in Jerusalem, and we're sitting in Shafat, and here Suha and Hussein Abu Khdair. These are the parents of Muhammad Abu Khdair, the young kid on July 2nd, 2014. He was kidnapped, taken into a forest, on the land, forest made by the Jewish National Fund, on the land of the Deir Yassin village that was destroyed, massacred. Palestinian Remembered website has it. And made to drink kerosene and set on fire, burned alive. So they were telling us about the story of what's going on with everybody from the delegation. This is a mural outside the house. It says Muhammad Abu Khdair. This is in old city of Jerusalem. Even though Israel is trying to kind of destroy, Marcus, you said you went into the gate inside and so on. This is I'm sure you tried this. This is Gakib Sim says it's one of the things that people love in Jerusalem, sesame bread, and they put za'atar in it. Za'atar is thyme that now Israeli cuisine has claimed also. Because as you know from indigenous experiences as well. So this is wherever you go in Jerusalem, you can buy it with 2 shekels, and people eat it for breakfast. This is the wall. This is the apartheid wall, part of the apartheid wall. From Bethlehem, you can see Muhammad Ali here. You can see the key of return, okay? And then on the wall, this is, I'll come back to this. Just go and then we'll come back. Okay. All right, so this is part of the barbed wire. This is not the wall near Jerusalem. Actually, this is outside of Beit El. Beit El is the settlement that is being funded by the president's son-in-law, the ambassador, and his chief advisor to the Middle East. They're actually paying money. This has been already established. So. We talked yesterday about Ahad Tamimi. This is her father. This is her aunt. This is her cousin who was beaten up when she was arrested. Okay, we were having, we went to visit them in their house. This is Ad-Damir, which is one main prisoner organization, prisoner support organization. Somebody may know this, Omar Barghouti. He is one of the co-founders of the BDS movement, the Boycott National Committee. I'm sure you saw him. Okay. This, we have a meeting in the Stop the War offices, and this is a meeting with a bunch of Palestinian leaders. He's an educator. He's actually was one of the leaders of the teachers' strike. And this is Jamal Jum'a, founder of the Stop the War. And there are all different Palestinians coming together to actually form a coalition as an oppositional movement of left groups that go back to the 60s. This is part of their, like they paint on the walls. Right? And you know Hamdallah, the Palestinian cartoon character who is bearing witness to justices and injustices of the world. This is the General Union of Palestinian Women. We went with them. Khitan is one of the former prisoners that she actually explained to us what's going on. This is the General Union of Palestinian Women was founded in 1965. And actually it came out and said the Palestinian is one whose mother or father is Palestinian, not just somebody whose father is a Palestinian. So they have been very active, and they actually were active underground during the Israeli occupation. So they were clandestine, and they organized, and nobody would say that they were part of the Union of Palestinian Women. So some people outside say, oh, there is all this activism and so on. But this was quiet, underground, because if you get caught, you could get imprisoned, and people were. So they continued organizing before and after. Oh yeah, this is actually, I'm sorry, I think this is Beit El. This is outside between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Okay, this is also part of the wall. You can see, you can go over it and you can look, there is like everybody who's been there has one. unpainted. This is a big mural of Layla Khaled. As you know, she was very one of the main Palestinian militant icons from the 60s and continues to be until now. But I've been accused of consulting with terrorism because when we went to Palestine, we met with her, and they said that, okay, this is part of our delegation. Actually, this is in Hebron. This is Badi Adwek and this is AMED Abu Shamsiyya. They are living in Tel Rumeda, which is in Hebron, in the area also blocked. AMED Abu Shamsiyya was a man who videotaped a killing of a Palestinian named Abdel Fattah Sharif, who was already injured. He was already on the ground. And a medic, Azaria, went and shot him dead. Instead of taking him to treat him, shot him dead. He took the video, and then they were trying to harass him to take the video from him in order to hide the crime, okay? And this guy was sentenced, and then after a few months, they let him out of prison. This is Adala. It's a Palestinian legal group inside Israel, which is in Haifa, actually defending the right of Palestinians to land and all. Okay, and this was incredible because this is Araqib, it is in the south. We were driving from one place to the other, and then the people who were with us said, oh, you do like, there is a protest for Araqib, you want to go? Araqib has destroyed over 100 times, and people get up and they build again. Well, one of the interesting things is the mayor of Araqib, they introduced me to him. I said, thank you for having us, we're happy. And I said, well, we have people from here, and South Africa. I said, South Africa? The ambassador of South Africa has been amazing. He is refusing. They made a plaque for ambassadors, and he refused to put his name, the Israelis. And he has come and visited them multiple times. So then the South African come and they have like a meeting with him. And it shows like the whole story that the Zim lines is the Israeli shipping lines. And the reason I'm putting it here is because in the Bay Area, you know, in 2014, there was Block the Boat. They basically, Bay Area, the local 10, which is Longshoremen Union, was the first union to block any shipping lines from South Africa, from apartheid South Africa. And in 2014, the workers would not cross the picket line of activists for justice in for Palestine, who said you cannot unload these shipping lines that are supporting the Israeli state. And so this again, the Longshoremen Union, once again did the right thing, and they blocked the boat, showing that there was a precedent during apartheid, and now there is a precedent, you know, for Palestine. This is a mural that's actually in my hometown, Nablus. Okay, and this is also, it's part of it. We'll show some more. Okay, so finish. Okay, so.
Well, I forgot to mention, there was just a couple of things that really, I think the main thing that impressed me so much, really impressed me, was we got to meet with a young man and a young woman that were, they were in the army. And
Breaking this, so
Israeli who fought.
yeah, it was one of them was with breaking the silence, and you'll have to forgive me. The young woman, actually, the thing that was remarkable about the young woman is that she refused to go in the army.
Yeah.
Sort of the lineage of where Israelis
Conscientious
are.
objectors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
conscientious objectives. So,
but just the fact that we got to talk with them, you know, just talking, it wasn't heavy duty program or anything. But what the young man talked to us about was, to me, was really important, because he said, he told us, walked it through. He said how we're raised from the time we're children, they're indoctrinated, that he said we're taught that the Israeli army is the only moral army in the world, and that they're standing against the world. So he said, I was raised that way. That's how I thought. He said, I totally thought that way. And he said, my older brother was in the military, and he said he was my idol, and he went through it all, and he came back, and he said, so I was ready to go, and he went. And, but he started seeing, you know, things that were happening, and not all at once, but slowly. And he started to see, and it happened slow enough for him where he could what do you call it, process it all, and slowly realize what was going on. And some of the things he talked about was how he and a few others that were supposedly on guarding the Israeli areas. He said they
Hebron.
ended up. He said protecting the Palestinian people because the most vicious settlers that came were from the United States, and most of them came from New Jersey. He said this, that they were the ones that demanded that the government let the settlers be armed and all of that, and he said, so that's what he ended up doing, was protecting people that just wanted to get through the checkpoint, to get to work or go, take care of whatever business they had to do and then come back across. He said there was. So anyway, things like that. He was saying that he was learning on his own. He was finding out that it was what was going on. So to me, that I was really impressed. And then when Marcos brought him over, he told him, and so he knew about Standing Rock, and we talked and visited. But before that, when he first came over to me, the first thing he said was, "How did you do that?" And I looked at him and I thought, this ex-military young guy in the Israeli, is Israeli, and I didn't expect him to even be thinking about it, let alone asking, because he said that's what we need to do. We need to, have that kind of solidarity. So there's hope. I just have every hope for all of you young people, and those of you that are here. No pressure. Change the world. No pressure. But you've got to do it. And there's enough out there. I mean, that one young man we got to talk to me, I just thought, there's hope,
And it's actually, it speaks to, during Vietnam, when the Vietnamese were fighting, if it wasn't also for the people who built a movement here, inspired by the Vietnamese, saying, we're not going to go fight. And then also during the Aqsa Intifada, I remember, because I used to go a lot and visit when my parents were alive, more often than now. Now I go like once a year, but when they were alive, I'll go as much as I can because I can spend time with them and see them. And there were a lot of checkpoints, there were a lot of closures and so on. And I remember one time we were crossing from Nablus to go to, and so there were 3 checkpoints, one after the other. And one checkpoint at Zatara, there were women carrying the sign of Mahsoum Watch, which is checkpoint watch. They were Israeli women, Israeli Jewish women. And I remember a story about one of them, that it was so moving until now, like it's just really moving, because she saw the Israeli soldiers stop a Palestinian man who was going into his hometown with a violin. The Israeli soldiers made him open the violin and play for them. And she was a Holocaust survivor. And she said, this reminded me exactly what the Nazis were doing to people. They actually were making them entertain them.
Yeah.
And this is the stories that actually got out, or the Israeli pilot who refused to drop bombs on Gaza. There are people, so what Israel is actually doing now is they hide how many the numbers. They do not publish the numbers of the people who refuse to serve. We met with Israeli organizers, activists, and they're saying that a lot of the times young people will claim psychological issues. And it's very similar with some of the stuff happened during Vietnam. Not everybody had the money to go to Europe or be Rhodes Scholar or just go to Canada or wherever. Some people had to stay and fight, but some people shot their legs. There's all sorts of things that people have done. But Israel is trying to hide that, because one of the biggest things about Israel is the army. The army is supposed to be the pride or joy of Israel. But now there is a serious problem, because the army is facing a crisis, because Israel is no longer able to mobilize people around this settler colonial project. It's having a hard time. Of course, there is a big right-wing move, but also there is a lot of resistance of young people who are saying, we're not going to go. We are not going to go. We're not going to go serve and brutalize Palestinians. We're not going to do it. So Israel does not want to make that public. So they hide the numbers. They sometimes let people, say that they have emotional problems or physical problems or whatever. They used to be very brutal about it, and kind of like until actually the Israeli invasion of Lebanon and during the 1987 Intifada. And then they actually figured out how they can publicize the public image, which is what they call hasbar, kind of like publicity and propaganda and so on. So they do not publicize that. So we do not know how many Israelis, but there are a lot of young people who do not want to serve in Israel.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
No, we had met with one young woman. I thought, for me personally, it was interesting to meet the soldier who had served and had done that introspection and made that journey to speak out against and breaking the silence. That organization represents soldiers who have accounted for, perhaps not justice, but at least they're speaking about crimes that they had performed, things that they had done. But it was interesting to then meet, after meeting him, to meet this young woman who she hadn't, one more lineage of the generation. She was saying, no, I'm not going to go and perform this trauma. I'm not going to support this military. And she went to prison. I think she went to prison for 3 months. And she was so inspiring that her younger sister also now is a conscientious objector. And so just to see the arc that, yes, there is hope and there is responsibility and there is each generation inspiring the other to get towards something more truthful and more just. So.
Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up to all of you. So we're going to first take questions by the students, and then we will take questions by visitors. But everybody has a chance, so please raise your hand, say your name, your question. We'll take 3-4 questions, and then we will go on. Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
My name
Can you just raise your voice or stand if you don't mind?
my name's Alex, and I was a little confused, and I was wondering if you could talk more about how Israeli citizens feel about Palestinians, because on the one hand, like your pictures with the mosques and synagogues all lined up in the street, it would seem that at least some people get along well enough. But then you have those night markets covered in wire, where people will throw feces and all sorts of things, and that Israeli doctor who cared more about the dog than the person who's bit. And I was wondering what's the dynamic right now, because it seems to be a bit of both.
Okay, Alex, right? Okay, another question. You can field them, right? Because you don't have problem with that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just see if there's questions that are Alex, Alejandro.
Alejandro. This one is from Madonna, considering the work you did with Women of All Red Nations and Standing Rock about water safety and access to water and all that. I don't know if you might have covered that earlier, I wasn't here, but in your trip to Palestine, did you see any similarities to the problems that people face here with water and water safety and all that? Because, considering that Israel controls the water of all Palestinians.
One more question. I will remember it. One more question. Speak up now or forever hold your peace.
Are you still dealing with students?
No, we can give adults first. Okay. All right, Jaime.
This is to Madonna, and one of the things now is an escalating, which has always been true with Palestinians. More and more there is an Israeli law now also prohibiting and stopping anyone from coming who has advocated or supported or spoken out on the question of Palestine. So what was your experience being a longtime activist? Did you get interrogated at you went through Ben Gurion Airport or you went through LMB Bridge?
Okay. All right, so we're going to start. Okay, so we're going to take these questions and we'll come back for another round. Okay? All right. So Alex's question was about Israeli. If you wanna address that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're clued into it, like you are in this room, the tension is, you can feel it, you know? There are Israelis walking next to Arabs every day. They don't speak to each other. They don't look at each other. They try to spend money respectively within their stalls or communities or whatnot. It's tense, you know? The Israelis go to the gym with automatic weapons on their shoulders.
And the malls.
The mall, they
and
walk
the
around.
strollers of the babies.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a regular thing. So, you know, to tie that back into our culture here, I mean, when people talk about my right to bear arms, it typically represents one group who wants to be armed to the teeth and to show their arms in public. Well, that's in Israel, the Israelis that will talk about safety and all this stuff. I mean, there's just automatic weapons walking around you all the time.
But they're not by Palestinian Arabs.
No,
by
no,
Israeli
no,
Jews
no.
or
Of
Yeah.
course not.
Palestinians.
Right,
Separate
exactly.
religion.
There are racial hierarchies within Israel as well that are clearly defined. So yeah, that tension is incredibly palpable. And it goes off all the time. So Jaffa Gate, which is predominantly access point for Palestinians accessing the old city. I mean, you can look up on YouTube, look up videos of Flag Day. Flag Day is a horrendous day where Israelis come out and celebrate nationalism, and young men rage through Jaffa Gate with, flags, and they tear up the stalls and they beat people up they find on the streets, and all the Palestinians know to be off the streets in this on Flag Day. It's horrendous. It's
like when the KKK roams.
Yeah, that's
You go
exactly.
and you
It
close
is.
your door and you turn off
Yeah.
the lights and you hope that they will pass
Yeah.
before you get torched or you get
Right.
angry.
They make it clear that Flag Day is coming and they're going to roll through town. I mean, you can think of this happening in our current political climate here. We're coming, and then the next day, it's back to relative peace. You never know. You don't know when things are going to pop off. And so if you're a tourist and you're there on a good day and you're only hanging out in the Israeli sides and you never venture over, you would never know. You would just be like, oh, the Israelis, they have great security and things are wonderful and the lights are on and the water flows and there are gay bars and all the
And they eat
tropes of
hummus.
liberal, and they eat hummus and they're all the tropes of liberal society, right? And they say, we have a wonderful democracy. Even though our image of democracy means the separation of church and state. But never mind that. They have a democracy, right? So anyways, the tension is there. That's my answer.
I think it's just also really important to also point out that there is stratification in Israeli society.
Yeah,
So it's not like
absolutely.
all Israelis against all Palestinians.
Right.
I mean, there is very widespread poverty. There is widespread wealth. There is a concentration of money in the hands of a few Israelis. While a lot of in 2011, Israeli young people set up something called Tent City, and they protested because there was no place for them to go live. Even though, I'm talking about even Israeli Jews who serve in the Israeli military and supposed to get access to resources, which Palestinians do not get access to any of that at all. Okay, but they don't have places to live. There is strikes. If you read the Israeli press, you will see strikes all the time by doctors, by nurses, by people who are working in all sorts of professions and so on, because simply there is the discrepancy in wealth. So that's one aspect. Then there is the whole question of Israelis on the racial slide. So we're talking about Ashkenazi, European or American Jews, compared to people who are Mizrahi or Sephardic who come from Arab or third world other countries, and the whole racial and there is a whole, and we talked about this before in this class, so we can, it's on, I just don't want to take too much time here. I mean, more than happy to talk about that, but I don't want to take too much time. There is also the whole question against the Ethiopian Jews, who Israel is supposed to have rescued, and then brings them to Israel and says, you need to reconvert again because you're not real Jews, okay? And so, and then now we know about the whole scandal of the birth sterilization of Ethiopian Jewish women and so on. And this is before we even talk about the African asylum seekers, that Israel is basically locking up and throwing out and so on. and so forth. And this is before we talk about the way Israel treats indigenous Palestinians. So if you want to think about comparative thing with the US, you can think about the ways in which the US is like one of, today we know about the whole question of the undocumented, we know about the Muslim ban, we also know about the continuing theft and the attacks and genocide against indigenous people, the legacy of slavery, the celebration of the Confederacy in the South and the statues and so on. So I think it's really important to kind of like look at some of the features, and then some people go around and they think everything is okay. San Francisco is such a beautiful city, and they could be walking around with gentrification projects that are going on, with water that is being destroyed and so on. So I think it's really important to kind of like also think about, because it's important to recognize them. It's also important to, it's not like really about a Palestinian and Israeli side. It's about questions of justice and injustice. So it's a very different way to kind of like frame it. Madonna, do you want to talk about the water?
Well, yeah, the first thing we kind of noticed when we started traveling around, well, everywhere, but in the populated areas, were and I kept taking all these pictures of these buildings with these big black tanks on top.
I should have put a picture.
You know, it looked like water tanks. I mean, I've seen them, you know, but they were black, painted black. So I said, "What are those?" And so the guy there on the bus told us. He said, "Well, those are all Palestinian homes. I mean, you know, of course, big, you know, apartment buildings, that type." He said, and they have to keep those tanks up there. They store the water because the water's turned off.
Mm-hmm.
It's only on for a certain amount of time. So they have to hurry up and fill up to keep those tanks full, because the Israeli government will just shut the water off. But then you look over at and there was a couple other buildings where they had tanks, but they weren't painted. Well, those are the Israeli buildings, you know, and they had those, but for different reasons, in case there was an accident or something. They would
It's
have
okay.
one.
I think they can. I mean, it's not a terribly good photograph. It's
No,
just
but
there's
keep it connected because you may want to show more things.
there's just two separate sets of
Yeah.
and then so often the distance here.
Is this
yeah.
Ramallah? Is Ramallah?
I'm forgetting
It's
what city,
Ramallah.
but yeah,
Oh,
it's Ramallah. Yeah, you can tell by the modernity of that as far as.
We're going to do,
So anyway, my point is to Madonna's point.
She wants to know if they're all for one home.
Excuse me?
If they're all for one home.
If,
They're all for one home.
on,
Top building, I think.
no, this is a whole like apartment
How many
building.
tanks do the one home get?
I don't know. So the main thing that I want you to take away from this photograph is often the distance
That's Ramallah.
are settlers, settlements. The settlements oftentimes are taken by force, and these are by all international law illegal settlements. However, they get trenched, they get hooked up to main municipal water, they get power, and they get a military presence nearby to protect the settlement that is illegal by all means. This city, Ramallah, which has been around for centuries,
And this is the seat of Palestinian government.
and it will on occasion come under siege, and so everyone knows that, and so the infrastructure has to be redundant. What you're seeing on the tops of all the buildings is built-in redundancy for the expectation that they will go without, and the settlers never go without.
And during, by the way, Aqsa Intifada, the Israeli soldiers went and shot. They shot bullets, so and
They
then
shoot the
people will
tanks.
lose the water. Because now you are under siege. You can't come out and go out of your house. So even if you want to like order water and the phones are cut off and the electricity is cut off, so even if you want to call the municipality and say, I have money to pay for water, and most people didn't, the water is like all the tanks on top of the buildings are like seeping water. So the water is actually getting destroyed, which is very precious, yeah.
And it's not illegal to do that?
The whole,
No, I mean like to have them, that infrastructure.
Okay,
You
so
have the
that-
tanks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Okay, so inside Palestinian areas, yes, there are certain zoning things and so on. But the whole question of legality is a very interesting question to ask because in many of the places, Palestinians build without licenses. Because they go to Israel, to the Israeli municipality, they try to get permits and they don't get permits. I mean, they just simply don't get permits. So after a while, they need to live, so they build. So then Israel comes and destroys. And inside Israel for Israeli citizens, actually Israel forces Palestinians to destroy their own homes. These dogs, for everything else, because if they don't, the government will come and destroy and will charge them twice as much.
Yeah.
So after they build their homes, they will have to pay $100,000, $150,000 to destroy the home. So they're always living in fear, worrying that at one day the Israeli government is going to come and put them an eviction notice and say, this is it, you need to destroy the home. And so, yeah, so it's, but inside the Palestinian, there is actually more like they have to get licenses and so on and so forth. I mean, it's very complicated because now you're talking about very small areas like Palestinian enclaves that are within the Israeli overall colonial system. So, because Oslo did not produce a Palestinian state. Oslo has 3 areas, A, B, and C. A is the Palestinian areas, where Palestinian Authority controls the city and the people during the day. But Israeli military has the right to come in every single night on raids, and they do. And that's how they take people prisoners. Area B is joint, Palestinian Israeli control, and Area C is all Israeli. And Area C is the largest part of the West Bank that also has been taken over mostly by settlements right now. So even if you want to talk about what's legal and what's not legal, it becomes, I mean, everything is illegal about it. The whole occupation itself is illegal, number one. The fact that Palestinians are unable to return to their homes from 1948 is illegal. The fact that the partition plan is not even itself implemented. And then the whole question you say, who's implementing legality or not? The United Nations itself, which allowed Israel to come to life and then destroy the Palestinian, but never saved it. So it's very, I think it's a very
just
interesting
imagine
idea.
that if it's part of the tactic of the state to suppress that, then they would make it illegal to do things that would.
Well, they do, it's just that the legality changes in different areas, and it's just a moving target.
And so this kind of infrastructure is not seen with,
And Ramallah, this is Ramallah.
yeah. So you
Ramallah
don't
is an
see it-
exception.
Okay.
The rest of the West, but when I take people on delegations, I have to tell you, I take them everywhere else and we end up the last day in Ramallah. Because if you go to Ramallah, even with the raids at night and so on, people sometimes don't think there's an occupation. But if you go to everywhere else in the West Bank, you go to everywhere else, even inside Israel, you'll see but so in Ramallah, the Israel is trying to kind of like make it possible for the Palestinians to present as if there is normal way of life. And this is the seat of the international NGOs, this is the seat of the embassies, this is the seat of everything. So there is like a very mixed, it's a very, the Oslo is like this big. And you know, it's like we can spend a whole semester just studying the Oslo Accords and what it means. So there is multiple levels of legality and governmental.
Well, I just want to say one example from, I'm trying to remember the gentleman, he has an organization that's incredibly important, I'm forgetting his name, but he
Where?
just,
Ramallah?
no, in Jerusalem, but
Oh.
as an example of the moving targets of laws, he's a multi-generational Palestinian from Jerusalem, but of course he's denied Palestinian statehood, right? There's no Palestinian state but he's there. He's a person. He's been there for his family's been there for generations. So they're given Jerusalem status.
IDs, yeah.
So he's a Jerusalemite, and he has a special identification.
But not Israeli citizenship.
Not
only
he's
Jerusalem
not
ID.
Israeli,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have Palestinian statehood either, right? So he's a Jerusalemite. He has an identification that says he's in Jerusalem, but they do these night raids where they do checking. They check to see if they do a residency check.
Mhm.
So they'll come at 4 or 5 in the morning and they'll knock on your door. And when you think about all this in the context of American life, you know, you go out, you get drunk at your friend's house, you stay at their house. You go out, you go on vacation, you go away for the weekend, these things. You cannot do those things, even though you are a multi-generational Jerusalemite. This is your territory. You have to go to bed every night. You have to be in your home. Because the law, the Israeli law states that if they come and check and you're not home, then you must not be occupying the home and they can take your home.
They take your ID too.
They take your identification. Now your state, you have no identity. You have no identity, no home, and those are Israeli laws. Those are little ways that they take your home, and you trickle. You kick one person out, you kick another, and those are the ways. So how that affects the consciousness of Palestinians that are living in the city of Jerusalem, who, to going back to what you had said, they're living in proximity to Israelis every day with two completely separate existence that Israelis have no idea that Palestinians live under.
Just to connect it with San Francisco State, remember 2 years ago San Francisco State University hosted Nir Barakat, the mayor of Jerusalem? Nir Barakat actually presides over a municipality whose purpose is to depopulate, engage in the ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem. So every single day, this is what Marcos is talking about. My brother lives in Jerusalem, and the Israeli census went to the house where the girls were during the day, and they actually interrogated when they're not supposed to. And if you're not over there, so he's actually still fighting to be able to regain his ID back. Same thing, Omar Barghouti. Omar Barghouti is married to a Palestinian woman in Akka, and now the Israeli state is forcing him to not even be in Ramallah where his job is. He has to go drive back and forth, and Akka is all the way in the north. It's very, very far, because if he doesn't, he will lose his Israeli ID. So there is this kind of active plan. It's not coincidental. It's an active plan to depopulate Palestinians, take away from them Israeli ID. Jerusalem, depopulate Jerusalem for Palestinians. Palestinians in the West Bank make their lives hell, so they can leave, so they bring more. And if you don't leave yourself, then they will come at gunpoint. That's what they're doing to Khan al-Ahmar, the people of Khan al-Ahmar, at gunpoint to get rid of people who are Bedouins, who are living on their land, in order to make room more and issue more permits for settlements, for colonies. So it's kind of like active. The process of Nakba, the Palestinian disposition, is continuing every single day. It's not something and I'm saying, it's something that everybody is saying. Madonna, how did you go in and out, and were you interrogated? Or did the Israelis treat you nice?
No, they totally ignored us, but they didn't bother us either. But I think the group we went with, the organization.
We had a funny interaction actually at the border. So
Where did you come? You went through Tel Aviv?
we went through
or-
Jordan.
Oh, you went through Jordan.
We went through Jordan, and I went up there, and they said, "Are you part of a tour?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm part of a tour." And then Madonna came up, and they're like, "She's like, okay, let's go." And they're like, "Where are you going? Where are you from?" And you were like, "You're like, oh, I'm from California. Are you with the tour?" And we're like, "Yep." And he's like, "You're Native American or something like that?" And you're like, "Yep." And we had this bizarre, jokey interaction.
Yeah.
He sent us on our way, and then completely interrogated the rest of the group.
Yeah.
And we were there for hours.
They didn't know what to do with me.
They interrogated the rest of the group.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, we just went up there and we're
Sometimes.
doing some jokes and sort of making light. They were like, "All right, go ahead." And the two of us went through, and the rest
We waited
and we waited for hours.
That's happened.
They held everybody up.
That's what happened with us in
Yeah.
2014. 10 hours they were interrogating
It was a
3
bunch of
our
hours.
colleagues.
Yeah.
It's like you were like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, we totally. Yeah. We did. We told.
through.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Just
that's
passed through.
I looked at him and I just talked to him like I usually talk, you know. He asked kind of dumb questions anyway.
See, this is one thing I think to keep in mind about colonialism and suppression is that the unpredictability. There is no predictability, so you cannot actually know what the rules are. You cannot think that this time you can get in, and if you do the same thing next time you will. You do not know that, because the whole state is set up to actually get rid of Palestinians and suppress them. Then the people at the borders, the military, are given latitude in everything they do. If even they go and shot an injured man on the ground and kill him, they still get away with it. They get away with murder, not literally with murder, okay? So this happens. What happened to the guy who killed the settler who killed, not the right winger who killed Muhammad Abu Khder, the kid who they made him drink kerosene, is that his parents went to the court and said, oh, you know, you're always destroying the homes of Palestinians you accuse of violence. Why aren't you destroying the home of this guy? And they said, no, this is not part of this Israeli law. They actually appealed to the Supreme Court, the Israeli Supreme Court, because they have Israeli ID because they live inside Jerusalem. The Hussein Abu Khder. It's very desperate, different laws. But then even at the border and the checkpoints, the soldier can do whatever they want. I mean, there were so many women who had miscarriages at the checkpoints. There were so many people who were shot. Like a family will arrive at the checkpoint, somebody just goes crazy and starts shooting. And where do you hold these people accountable? I mean, just like what's happening in the U.S. Look at how the youth are getting killed left and right and so on. Nobody holds anybody accountable because it's not even the whole concept of law. Does not really mean anything because there is one law that is made for the colonizers and there is another law made for the colonized. And the Israeli Supreme Court agreed at one point that, and it's still in presence, that torture is okay. Torture is okay. There were 2 Palestinian prisoners that hijacked a bus to demand the liberation of other prisoners. And the Israeli military caught them. They were seen in pictures alive, and then they were dead. And so they went and they investigated, and it turned out that they were tortured. The Israeli Supreme Court ruled that some amount of pressure is okay if it protects the security of the state of Israel. Where have you heard that before? Go look at Patriot Act 1, Patriot Act 2, look at rendition, look at waterboarding, look at all the stuff that not only that they did in Afghanistan and Iraq, they've done here, in Guantanamo, they've done here, elsewhere that, I mean, this is happening every single day. Look at what's going on in the prisons of the United States. So I think it's kind of like we need to kind of like expand our analysis and think about all of these things that are happening. So it's not the second set of questions. Didn't you have a question in the back? No? Okay. Comments? Questions? If you want to make comments now, it's your chance. Not too long, but some comments is okay. And the students in the class, if you have comments, or anybody else, people who are visiting, please. Any questions, any comments? What do you think? Reflection? Yes? Yes, Tony, please.
Yes, I think from the perspective of a combat veteran myself in Vietnam, and I was drafted at 18, just 6-7 months after graduation from high school, and I was there in 68 and 69, and it's kind of like I woke up after the second time I got wounded, and I was laying in bed, and I looked around me, and because I thought I can't take another wound, I'll probably get killed the next time, but I was beginning to wake up, and later on after the discharge from the military, just like these Israeli soldiers that you meet, you wake up because you've been living a lie. And that's, I think, in essence, what they were going through their own process of decolonizing and learning the truth and having been lied to. And it's a whole reconstruction that the individual goes through, like myself, reconstructing and on the road to finding the truth to this whole quagmire that we're in as a people. So, I somewhat sympathize with the Israeli soldiers, like in that sense. But the important thing is you got to cop to your criminality.
Yeah.
And I think that's a stumbler, another hurdle for a veteran to overcome, is realizing that you were that criminal.